Hey, Bob. Hey, Sharon.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Sorry about being a little bit late. 2, 3, 4. Oh, I think we have a quorum.
Recording in progress.
Oh, yep, Marianne's here.
Hey, Marianne. Thanks for joining. All right, we'll call the 13th, the January 13th FinCom meeting to order. So again, thanks everybody for joining this week. And again, I know we were going to do this ahead of we were posted for the school committee meeting, but Sharon, I'll just kind of kick it over to you and just to kind of have you give the kind of similar update that you gave to me regarding this request, and then and I know a couple of members had some questions we can kind of go through and then kind of tick through it. All right.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks. Sharon.
So what we're looking to do this evening is to approve a FinCom reserve fund transfer for $80,000. This is for COVID home tests, which are kind of hard to come by right now, and directly from the manufacturer, which is a pallet, which is about $80,000. And they're going to be used for discharge for them. I think they were going to be distributed for free. And ARPA would be a source of funding, but the select board hasn't met to discuss any yet. So I didn't want to assume that they would put this there, but I'm sure that they will. But you guys were already posted, so I figured I would see if we could get a FinCom transfer, and then I'm seeing them on February 1st, and I can ask them specifically to, put some funding towards the public health emergency piece of the ARPA.
Cool. Thanks, Sharon. And then again, just so I'm clear, that and I think you might have told me this directly, but this was something that that Day had kind of identified, and then and that that was the request kind of generated from the health director.
Yeah, the CARES grant ended in December, but we actually stopped using it in October because the state used whatever funding was left over from all the communities through October 31st through December 31st. And the intent, I think, was that ARPA would pick up where CARES left off, but we'd have a spending authority when it comes to ARPA, and we really haven't discussed how that money is to be distributed. And that's why I felt, well, let's just do the FinCom transfer, and then we can have that conversation, allocate some funds for testing and all of that.
Yep.
And I can give you an update that Day and I had found about $9,000 and made a smaller order at a higher price per unit. And yesterday that order was placed a week or 10 days ago. Yesterday we were told, late yesterday, we were told that it was going to be delayed to the end of the month, another 3 weeks. And today we got it in. So it's hard to know what quality of the supply chain or the information you're getting is.
Yep.
But clearly, we didn't have anywhere near 80,000 to order something that would be, a community-wide distribution. $80,000, I should add. And it's really hard to plan an event because of the timing of delivery. So we are ready to do it. We've practiced it at different events, including a clinic. It's just a matter of when supply will arrive.
Cool. Jeffrey, I know, Mary, I see your hand, but I know Jeffrey had a couple questions too that he sent across. Jeffrey, I don't know if you wanted to kind of, tick through a couple of those that you'd had.
I mean, Bob answered most of them in his email, so I don't know whether, you want to include his responses. The point was that the memo that we got didn't include the fact that the health director requested it and didn't explain, how these tests were going to be distributed, were they for the public or for staff, that sort of question. So, right? We just did hear that it would be a public distribution for residents of the town at some future date when we get them in.
Yeah, and further to some of Jeff's questions, it's for the public at large. There's no sort of qualifications or disqualification, if you will. It's whoever might show up and be a resident, and undoubtedly we'll have to allocate so many per car, or so many per person, or so many per household. We don't know yet because we don't have the supply. Just like we did for the initial mask giveaway.
Right. Go ahead, Mary Ann, sorry about that. I just want Jeffrey asked those questions, so I just wanted to be able to check out them first. But go ahead.
So 2 questions. How many tests is it for $80,000?
It's somewhere between $5 and $10 each. I don't remember the exact figure. We paid $15 10 days ago, so it's it's a better price.
So does it work out to be? I'd have to do the math. Does it work out to be like 1 per resident or something? Or
it's like 15,000 roughly.
Okay, so it's less than the number of residents.
It could be a couple per household, and we also know, as I'm sure you guys know, some people already have some or plenty.
Yeah. And I guess the other question, and I think Sharon cut in and out, so maybe she answered this and I didn't hear it. So that we're taking this out of the reserves. Could the select board appoint money, appropriate money, and then that would get put back into FinCom reserves? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, if they do it, within the, let's say before town meeting, that's exactly what Sharon would do. She'd just reverse a journal entry or whatever. And then if for some reason select board don't act that fast, I would recommend the town meeting replenish your reserves, just because you want to have, I think, 200,000 going in for the rest of the year, because you just don't know what might happen.
Okay, and the last question I have is, at this time, and this may be a conversation between you and Fidel, do you anticipate if you're going ahead and having select board appropriate any money if they get around to it? Are there other ARPA appropriate expenses that we're incurring right now that might be a good thing to cover out of ARPA? I mean, I know I'm on the ARPA committee and I know we're forming that, but we also have to have some, be proactive. We're running clinics right now. The schools are having to do extra tests. And if it would be prudent to upfront some of that ARPA money now to help actual COVID costs, I don't know that our reserves would cover it, but I just didn't know your thoughts.
That's a good question. I mean, certainly the order that Fidel put in a week or so ago could be eligible for, about $9,000. I'll really have to sit down and think about it. Most of what I've seen, at least for the schools, has all been free from the state. That doesn't mean they haven't spent money I don't know about. And I'll try to think about other clinic expenses we've had and whether that would be ARPA eligible. And I'm sure Sharon will think about it. Whatever it is, I don't think it's a big number right now.
No, it looks like it would barely touch if you had $3.5 million in ARPA.
Yeah.
This is like a pocket change. Thanks. That's my only question.
Jean, did you have your hand up or did you take it down?
I did. I was wondering the same thing Mary Ann was wondering about, in the event that the select board decided to spend ARPA money, would it come back into the reserves? And just agreeing with Bob that in the event that didn't happen, we would have to ask town meeting to replenish our reserves back to 200K. So my question is answered. Thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions from anybody?
I just wanted to mention, I believe that the tests that were given out before the holiday break for the teachers, they came from days, so they were free. I don't think we had to pay for those.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, and next Tuesday night, the chair from Board of Health and possibly a day will be in to give the board more of a comprehensive update if you're interested. Only 15 minutes or so, but still kind of a bigger picture.
That's next Tuesday select board?
Correct. Probably right around 7:30. Maybe a little later.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's Joe, just quickly, Bob, I know you mentioned like the supply chain's beyond your control, but like, do we have any sense like when they could be available or? I'm just wondering, like, what happens if they show up in March, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, when we placed the original order, it was 7 to 10 days, and that's about what it turned out to be. And then, different stories got told along the way. At the time that order was placed, a larger order was the same, 7 to 10 days. But we know since then, generally speaking, things have slowed down because now lots of demand. If it does come in March, we don't think that there'll be less of a need for this. We do think, the curve is hopefully seemingly already peaked. But we don't see this going away, and we don't know what other peaks might be ahead. So we think that tests generically, if we were buying like, 50 per household, then absolutely not. That'd be crazy. But for 1 or 2 per household, or 1 or 2, per person, we're not too concerned. And if for some reason it comes in at a time when there's not enough demand, they don't disintegrate, so they're still valid. We've stored a lot of masks. We've stored a lot of PPE from when we had federal money, and there is a shelf life for some of that stuff, but it's not at all immediate. So we can hang on to stuff if there's no demand. From the mask giveaway, people stayed in line for an awfully long time for something that was free, even when they had their own, and many of them told us that. So we think that there'll be demand.
okay, thank you.
Good, Gene.
Yeah, I don't know if we're past questions into comments, but this to me is just exactly why we have FinCom reserves, so that when we are dealing with the situation, which we are right now with the Omicron variant, that we can move quickly and allow staff to get the tools that they need. From what I understand over the last month, testing is going to be key now and moving forward. So I'm very comfortable with this transfer.
Mark?
So just a question on for the select board meeting next week. Will it be presented that we approved, but they should consider, replenishing and using the ARPA? How does that all get raised?
I don't remember the exact wording I used, but a packet went out to the board for the meeting today, and I did spend a paragraph or 2 discussing this, and that, a FinCom request was going to be made. Honestly, I don't remember the exact wording I used for the rest. I'm sure the board will know the results of it, because I'll mention it if the Board of Health chair and the health director don't. And then Sharon will see them the week after, or the meeting after that, to have a more detailed discussion.
So but if we approve tonight, we can approve it and ask for the select board to consider using ARPA funds as well.
Yeah, you could certainly.
Yeah, so what would happen if they said yes to move to putting this on ARPA? I would move the expense to the grant, and then the funding would sit there in the general fund operations and would close out to free cash. And our normal practice is to ask to replenish. So it's kind of a wash. It would close out to free cash and come out of free cash, so they wash out, and that would be the way it would work.
So if and just mechanically, just to kind of follow that thread on. So we vote, and if we approve and following that same path, select board says, yeah, we'll use ARPA in the short term before town meeting. Do we end up having to go to town meeting to ask to replenish, or is that what you were saying as far as the journal entry? It kind of gets stalled within itself prior to having to go to or not having to go to town meeting for approval?
If the board does agree before town meeting, you'd be back to 200,000, and then it would be up to you as you're closer to town meeting, even on the floor of town meeting, whether you're happy with about 200,000 or you want more.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I just was curious if the approval does happen, then that solves one request, for replenishment. Whether we augment it is something else we should consider. Probably should jot that down in my notes, just as something for us to debate ahead of town meeting. Any other? Excuse me. Any other? Oh, sorry, Mary. I see your hand now. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking. This is I've been on FinCom now a couple of years. This is the first time I've seen an appropriation out of our reserves. Is there any other things, Bob, that like that could arise that you could say, I know these tests are important, but darn, we need more than 120 in reserves. There's this other kind of emergency, or are there other ways we would cover that? Like, I feel like I agree with Jeannie that this is a prudent purchase. I would prefer it to see it come out of the grant and save it, because it's really not a very big reserve fund. Is there any other thing that would be like, what other things in the past has the reserve had to be used for, and would any of those be likely to happen between now and town meeting? And I know you don't have a crystal ball, but
fantastic question, Mary. Really great.
The danger period, if you will, is usually between annual town meeting and the fiscal year end, when you don't want to call a town meeting. So you want to make sure FinCom has healthy reserves. And I remember one year, probably going back 10 years, where there was a multiple $100,000 shortfall in some assessing needs. So there is a kind of an obscure clause under state law that I think this was the only time Reading used it, where a joint meeting of the Finance Committee and the Select Board could vote to move surplus from a different line into the line it's needed. If this was the school department, you wouldn't have to do that. It's bottom line.
So it's like when they move between cost centers, this would be the equivalent.
Yes. So
okay.
For instance, if there's a surplus in health insurance at the end of the year, it could be moved to the Board of Assessors, which I think is what happened. So that's a good kind of emergency, because in June, there's always going to be a surplus somewhere. You might have to cobble together 3 or 4 lines, but you'll find it. Otherwise, I can't think of anything that's specific that won't be known by town meeting. It would be unusual. It would be the unusual thing that happens after town meeting. And, the assessing was the only example I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, and we have this huge free cash balance. So, I mean, the money is there. It's just, we have to be able to do what we want with it.
Yeah, as long as you can hit town meeting with that request, then you can use the free cash. It's just that, so, if the FinCom felt that they wanted to have a $500,000 reserve between April and June, you could ask. Because again, you don't want to try to have a special town meeting in the last 2 months of the year just for one thing. And you want to make sure that if something odd comes along, you're all set. We didn't have to worry so much about that in the last fiscal year closes, because we did have a lot of federal money, the CARES Act. So, Sharon was putting a lot of stuff on the grant. She doesn't have that ability right now. So her hands are much more tied at this fiscal year end, unless something else changes, unless some other money comes along.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of the water main break from the fall, and we were lucky we had the water reserves, and that the particular disaster fell under a category where we had a special fund. And so I don't know if there was like some other infrastructure thing that could happen, or something snow related.
If there is, for instance, a water main problem after town meeting, and there's not enough money in the water budget, then again, you might be asked either for a reserve fund transfer, or if it's even bigger, to move from money from the general fund into the water fund if there's enough surplus. That would be bizarre, but it could happen.
Okay. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. But Bob, I think that, that leads to making sure that, whether between yourself or me, or, making that request back to tie off that loose end with the Select Board, just to, give that reasoning behind it to, since it is, so easily ARPA eligible, to get that, kind of tied off. And then that way we're, just, kind of, cover, again, it's not a big dollar amount, but, I'd rather have as, the reserves where they should be in, in for insurance purposes.
Yeah, understood.
So I can have, I'll more than likely I would be on on Tuesday too. So I can always, I can take a bullet or two on this one, Bob, if we
I don't mind taking them all right now.
Actually, we should flip that. I mean, we should using you as the shield. No, that's fine. No, but totally, I think but like it's. again, Mary, I can't reiterate how much I love it's that question, to be able to kind of understand like what we typically would do, what we would need it for, and and mapping all that out. That's it's kind of a, and then because it does lead to some kind of near-term actions that we want to make sure that we address.
Yeah, and when you think of big problems, if it's not something that one of us missed, it's probably infrastructure. I mean, there's not going to be a sudden salary emergency that no one could have thought about.
Yeah.
So it's going to be something big that went wrong.
Yeah, or again, something like this that's unexpected and
Right.
that's related to the pandemic, or something that's going to be a little bit more urgent that we need to be able to address.
Yep.
And having that the ability to be flexible is kind of what we want to maintain.
And many years we do ask town meeting for money in public safety for overtime, and most years we turn it back. But just to have that extra cushion for the end of the year, so we're not into the problem that you're describing, because God forbid there's a large event with a big call out, you have to do it. It's not optional.
Yeah.
And that way, again, you prevent the how do we pay for it question.
Yep. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Seeing none. Oh, cool. All right, go now. Just want to. I finally got the right view where I actually can see you all together, so that makes it a little bit easier. So I'll entertain a motion.
You want me to go in?
That would be terrific. It's better than me, Jean. Absolutely.
Got you. Move to approve a transfer of $80,000 from the Finance Committee Reserve Fund to purchase COVID home test kits.
I'll second.
Thanks, Mary Ann. All right. Well, any other questions? No. All right. Seeing no hands, I'll roll call this in the order that I see you on the chat. Jean.
Yes.
Mary Ann.
Yes.
Jeffrey.
Yes.
You guys move once you talk too, so this is why it's a little tricky. Jackie.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
And Ed, yes. I believe that's 7-0.
Okay, thanks.
No.
Ed, if you can come to town hall and sign something, and if that's not convenient, Sharon can email it to. If you could then sign it and scan it and send it back, that'd be great.
Can I do that tomorrow or?
Oh yeah, there's no hurry. It could be next week.
Okay.
It's not urgent.
Yeah, I mean, I get in the car now, but no. Yeah, I'll be there. I can stop by.
Is the school committee meeting in person tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Town hall's closed tomorrow, right, Ed?
Right, exactly. Ed, if you're going to the meeting in person tonight, why don't I bring it down? I'll just see you before 7.
Well, here's the thing, Bob. The meeting is in person, but I've got my jammies on. No, I was planning on just doing it remotely tonight.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'll stop in.
Next week is fine.
I'll stop in on Monday.
Is anybody going?
Possibly.
Monday's a holiday.
I'll be watching, but I'm watching from home.
Yeah, I'll be. I mean, and I'll be watching.
Yeah, I'm watching.
tomorrow.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah, not in person.
You might be saved there, Mark and Jeffrey, if you don't. So if you're going to because we're posted, you don't necessarily have to do it from that perspective.
No, I feel like I'm more engaged with the presentations if I'm actually there.
That is my only lament. I do pay attention, but that there's again, no one answers me when I talk when I'm remote, and that's
Yeah.
probably the harder part. I think they're thankful, but I don't get the answers I'm looking for.
They're going to come before us with the budget, and we'll have chances to ask in person then. I think,
Absolutely.
Seth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think and my advocacy for us to see it and to be able to join these now is just so that you can, there'll be points that you kind of catch now. And then when it gets presented to us, you've given it a little bit more thought, you've had a change, you know what I mean? So we get a little bit more in depth. And again, at least it's how my brain's wired. I have to hear it a couple, 3 times before I can, try to ask an intelligent question. So I think having us participate in it it ends up being really helpful. And just so you can be able to grasp it a little bit better. And I think it was Jackie L that mentioned it. Thank you for reminding me that Monday's also a holiday. So Bob, I promise I'll get there. It'll be Tuesday. So did we have anything else from a business perspective that we had to
Minutes approval.
do tonight?
Yeah, I can give a motion if you'd like it.
That would be great.
Move to approve the Finance Committee minutes dated December 1st, 2021.
I'll second that. I read them.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Any comment? No hands. All right, I'll go through and take the vote. Jeffrey,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Mary Ann,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Joe.
I wasn't at the meeting, so should I abstain, I guess? Is that
That's fine, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, that's fine, Joe. Mark,
Yes.
Jean, did I call on you?
Yes, you did.
Everyone's moving. I gotta stop looking at from this window. And Ed, yes. So that's 601 approval of the minutes.
So in the minutes, one of the questions that I was recorded as asking was when we were going to work further on the ARPA subcommittee. Like we had a kind of a timeline sketched out in the original proposal that had us in December or January voting on the members from the other boards and kind of looking at free cash and deciding how much was surplus that we wanted to say we should really spend down.
Yep.
And looking at our schedule, we only have posted meetings in conjunction with school committee for the rest of January and nothing in February for us. So I wondered whether we wanted to, add another 6 p.m. meeting or something, or whether we're not ready to move on those items on the timeline.
Yeah. So I think I appreciate you raising it. It's probably a good thing for us to just to give a quick little update on. I think first timelines that were in there were ambitious, or kind of a thumbnail that we kind of put out there, given that we're on the latter half of those 2 months that you mentioned. But then I think also too, just tactically, we're still waiting for the select board on their side. School committee has met and allocated their two members, where and I think that it's, if I recall, it was on the select board agenda for next week, but I haven't seen the final agenda. But if that happens, so
It is on discuss and vote is an agenda item. I was just looking at it.
Perfect. That's what I knew. I think
Hopefully the discussion leads to a vote.
Exactly. So I think that that kind of gets us. So Jeffrey, I think that kind of gets us to the point where then, now that we've had, not once we have all the attendees and our committee members, or however we want to, what the phraseology is on that, then we can start to move and then to start to schedule up that subcommittee, those subcommittee meetings.
Maybe we could ask select board to move it up in the agenda. It's like their last item, and if they run late, I don't know. I'm looking, they have it at 9:30 p.m. after the community garden. Like maybe we could move it ahead of community garden. We don't have any power over their agenda, but it would be nice if they could.
But just to mention, it was up early in the agenda and they actually asked to move it back. So
Maybe they expect a long discussion and argument and want to have it last. Oh, well.
I sure hope not. I'm going to take the other side of the coin on that one, Mary, and it's just logistics. But I'll check into with Karen and just well and again and in some path maybe even through you, Bob, if there's anything that would help on my end to help facilitate it. If there's any other kind of information that they may need, I'll make sure that the kind of lines of communication are open. So if they need anything to help facilitate the discussion at their meeting, that they have everything that they need.
Yeah, I'd say the big gating item is that our treasurer borrowed for 1 year for the water tank, the $2 million, and so he would have to know next fall whether to roll that over and borrow again, or whether it will be paid down, or whether it'll be some combination. So I would say that, if nothing happens, he'll have to borrow. That's just the way it is. But if there's an anticipation of a decision, it'd be awfully good to know by, I'd say September-ish for that, because it takes a while to plan a debt authorization.
So just kind of walking through that. How long, like if say it's September, and so what's the process that the treasurer goes through at that point? Like, so when would that?
Sharon, do you remember what the maturity date was? Was it early December for the ban, Sharon? For the water tower? Do you remember what the maturity date on the 1 year ban was? We can't hear you. We still can't hear you.
You're muted, Sharon.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm thinking it's the end of the end of the calendar year.
Oh, okay. So I'd say, the treasurer would probably want 6 to 8 weeks to prepare to issue. Does that sound about right, Sharon? Between the legal work with bond counsel and the,
Oh yeah, need at least
marketing work for the financial advisor, I'd say that's the least you'd want. So again, a decision in September would then allow him to know what he has to plan, if anything.
And so if he does have to plan and he does, go that route, there is how much extra cost is associated with that versus just going down in the path of using whatever allocation from ARPA.
I'd have to try to remember the ARPA schedule offhand. I'll just take a guess. If he has to borrow again, I'm going to say that at a minimum he'd want to borrow for maybe 6 months, because I just have in my mind there's some ARPA deadline where you have to identify the funding and spend it. And I'm not sure if I'm remembering the right year, but there is a point at which, the ARPA option goes away and he would have to permanently finance it. So right now he's just temporarily borrowing at very low interest rates. So it's more of a logistics than a cost question, Ed. He could keep rolling it over and keep borrowing for relatively short money. I'm sure it's less than 10 grand. Or
okay.
Actually, with bond issuance cost, it might not be, but it's not a really big number.
Okay.
And right now, there's no other debt issue planned. That doesn't mean something might not happen. So he's not sort of targeting some other economies of scale kind of issuance. It's just, this is standing on its own.
Gotcha.
So in the perfect world, there'd be a decision made by the fall of next year, so that he could decide, do I need to borrow permanently, or will this be paid off, or some combination?
Gotcha. Okay.
So this is telling us that the ARPA committee has to get a move on fast so they can make recommendations to the select board, who has to get a move on fast. So we all have to expedite getting this info.
If there's some desire to have a perfect world and to have the big picture totally solved, then yeah, everything you said is right. If you're willing to sort of take a detour and just pay 1 or 2 million for this, project, knowing it's eligible, then that's a different approach.
So now this is like a couple of things that theoretically the ARPA committee could say, okay, these things don't have to flow through the committee because we know they qualify. And COVID funding was one, and this was another. So that's as a committee member from FinCom, that's an interesting way to approach it. And it might also simplify what we have to do if we say, let's take the low hanging fruit and not even, have lengthy discussions on it, because we know this is for the best to save the residents of the town money. We need to do these things now, because if we don't, like you're saying, this borrowing again, it's going to cost the town more. The water borrowing.
Yeah, and the water rates, the hearing will be usually in the spring after I'm gone, but I'm going to preview the rates before I go. Right now, the budget for next year, this decision does not impact that budget or these rates, but it will the year after. And right now, the forward-looking budget, if you will, anticipates no ARPA funds is used, and this will have to be paid for by the rates.
Gotcha.
So the timeline, Ed, says that FinCom will decide how much free cash is to be considered surplus. So it's sort of giving the subcommittee the amount of money they're supposed to work with, as opposed to, some of these things are for the subcommittee to decide. I mean, the whole process of, as Jean described it, deciding how we will decide what to spend the money on. But it seemed like, deciding how much money was going to be put up there, that is supposed to be a FinCom decision, not a subcommittee decision, according to the timeline sketch that we had reviewed in December.
Yeah, so my thought process on the FinCom decision on free cash is in some ways maybe just kind of tempered slightly, because I wanted to make sure that we were kind of trying to prioritize the ARPA eligible types of items, and hopefully also kind of giving us I didn't want to kind of maybe in some ways broaden the scope too much of the subcommittee from a funding perspective, and just maybe just kind of again walk before we run type of piece of it, but just interested in how others kind of feel about that. I just if we kind of open up everything, then I worry about the ability to move a little bit more judiciously, and specifically to some of the points that that Bob was mentioning before on this thing with the bond, the Treasurer and Bond Council. But I do think Jeffrey bring up a good point, and I don't know, Bob, Sharon, if like what type of process that we would need to go under on our side to be able to think about just kind of free cash in and of itself, and then I'm obviously not kind of in a position to to think about what's kind of a surplus or not as it relates to that, but what types of kind of data points could we have in order to inform ourselves on something like that.
So I don't mean to be, a wet blanket, but we can talk about this even though this is not on the agenda.
Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, actually, I think Marianne brings up a really good point. I think we need to be careful about not talking about things that aren't on the agenda. However, what Jeffrey is saying is, I think he'd like something on the agenda. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
on a future agenda, or like we need a February meeting, I think, to get ARPA rolling once we know our people, it sounds like, because we were going to have that on the website.
And I think Jeffrey asks a really fair question about where where this fits in with the ARPA subcommittee. And I think my thinking is sort of aligned with Ed's. I think that given everything we've discussed about the ARPA subcommittee, I think that focus initially needs to be on, we have a set amount, we've got a chunk of money, a set amount of time to spend it, how we're gonna make this decision as a town. But I think this whole free cash question is out in the ether and it could inform those decisions. So I like the idea of having it on a future FinCom agenda item to discuss. And I have thoughts about what we might ask staff to provide us so we could begin to have those discussions. But to Mary Ann's point, we shouldn't have that tonight. But I do think it should be a future agenda item for sure. And I would add to that a stabilization fund. Whenever we talk about this thing about free cash, where the balance is, where the balance should be, I also think about stabilization fund and how and if we want to utilize that mechanism more, because they're connected in my head. So I think it's a future agenda item for FinCom meeting.
Definitely, that sounds good. I appreciate that. Thanks for the course correction, ladies. Appreciate that. And we should have something. We should try to put a February meeting together. Hopefully on the early side. Is that something we want to do now, or is that something we just kind of debate after the fact? I know Jackie L. You sent.
Does anyone know when February vacation is?
Yeah,
It's late this year.
Like the week of the 28th, I think.
21st.
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 Yeah, I think the February 17th is right before. I think that was the day. Let me see.
Yeah, the 9th and the 16th are Wednesdays.
Right. I'm sorry. I was giving you a Thursday. Yep, the 9th and the 16th.
I think I'm okay for either one of those.
Same.
Yep, me too.
Maybe Ed, after the select board meets on Tuesday, you'll have a better idea where they stand. And you could just circulate an email to FinCom asking for availability on both dates.
That sounds good. I'll do that. That works. Cool. Thank you. Thanks for that guidance. Any other kind of questions or comments from the committee?
Just one item. I found out this afternoon that the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting next week is all virtual. I just got a link to register. It's free. It's on Friday the 21st into Saturday the 22nd. So Ed, should I send that to you or should I send it to Jackie if others want to register and haven't gotten the link yet?
Yeah, why don't you send it to Jackie just in case?
Okay.
Thanks, Jackie.
Jackie, what kind of meeting is this? Is this a meeting for training for FinCom or just a general meeting?
My understanding is it's their annual meeting and
Okay.
It's virtual only. There's speeches from Lieutenant Governor, senators, and some awards. And I think it just, the annual meeting agenda. And they are also in this link that I'll send to Jackie. They're launching a series of workshops next week or the week after next, rather.
Well, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, Mark. All right, I'm gonna do it differently so I don't miss anybody here. Mary Ann.
Yes.
Jackie.
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Jeffrey.
Yes.
Joe.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
And Ed, yes. 7-0. We are adjourned. Thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate you guys doing this. Thanks everybody.